Chris Hewish. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Mishka. Happy to be back.
Yeah, so last time you were here, you an interim CEO or a president of Xsolla?
Gosh, last time I was probably in the interim CEO role as we were going through rebuilding our executive team to prepare us for this next stage of growth that we've been experiencing.
Nice. And now you're back at being president. So there was an election
Yes.
inside of Xsolla and you won. You got the nuclear codes now. So for folks who don't know you, so yes, you are president of Xsolla, second term. Congratulations. And prior to that, you had leadership positions at Activision, Skydance, DreamWorks, and Survios.
Servios. Yes, a great,
Survios. See,
great VR studio, one of the pioneers.
Survios. Yeah, I'm not familiar with VR studios, but their games look really cool. And what people don't know about you is that every time we record a podcast with you, it's so easy because you come extremely prepared. Like you have pages and pages of material we can talk about. So I'm excited. I'm excited because like there's tons of topics.
Absolutely. And I'm thrilled as well. I always enjoy coming on the podcast. And, I have to give full credit to that preparation element to Joseph Kim, because back in the day, I remember doing some podcasts with him, and he
Yeah.
always had a document prepared ahead of time that we would put our notes and our thoughts in. And as well as yourself, I mean, you do that for your podcast, right? So I only learned from the best. So thank you.
Yeah, well, he's a diligent guy, and yes, I've learned from him. But also, Joe Kim told me the most important part, where I asked him like, "How can you shoot so many podcasts, so many videos so quickly?" And he's like, "Listen, man, if it takes you more than 15 minutes to prepare for the podcast, that means there's nothing interesting to talk about. Like, if you really have to find topics to talk about." So this podcast took me less than probably 2 minutes to figure out what we're talking about because you had Xsolla State of Play report. So there's a plenty of interesting topics there. And I was thinking that as you probably prepared, let's talk about these six different topics. So today we're going to talk about mobile gaming market growth, always very positive stuff. We're going to talk about diversity in gaming. That was one of the topics that was in the state of play. So Xsolla State of Play report autumn edition. There's global market trends and preferences. There's impact of Digital Markets Act. This is super interesting because this is changing so rapidly with all the legal cases coming back and forth. Cross media integration, fascinating. And then, of course, we can't have you on without talking about what's going on with the web shops now, because that is also an area that is rapidly evolving. I don't know a company that hasn't been using web shops or adopting web shops as of late. So very interesting to hear like what's the situation right now. So Chris, let's dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our report that we put out a few times a year, we put tons of information into it. And we also engage with a lot of our partners and people that we know throughout the industry to get various inputs and voices into the report. So I really appreciate the platform. And yeah, let's dive in and pull out some of the nuggets that might be of interest to people.
Perfect. Link to the report will be in the description below, whatever platform you're using. So click on that and you'll be able to access the full shebang. But let's talk first about mobile gaming growth. So in the report, you talked about that it's forecast to generate almost 100 billion globally in 2024, with Asia being the largest contributor to the growth. You talk about the emerging regions. So I think MENA has been kind of like the focus of everything, and Xsolla has been doing a lot of stuff in Saudi Arabia as of late as well. So that has definitely been the focus of growth, as well as Latin America and Africa. So what's happening with the mobile gaming market and its growth?
Yeah, so I think we're now back to a growth mode in the mobile market. Obviously, 2022 we saw that downturn. Things kind of leveled out in 23, and it's really exciting now to see that the industry is back to growth as people have started to figure out how to get back to acquiring users and just the strength of the market overall. We do go through in the report. We highlight all the different regions and we pull out key data points around the number of players, sort of how much revenue is being generated by region, the growth rates for each region. For instance, if I look at just North America, right? We have Canada and the U.S. here, and we break those down. The U.S. is projected to have player spending on the rise by 12.3% year over
Oh,
year,
wow.
which is great, right? And then we go through Latin America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia Pacific, Australia, and Oceania. We cover a lot of different players and regions. And let's look at New Zealand, which is a place that I love. I've been to a number of times, working with a great company down there, Pickpock, back in the day. And that's a region that is, or a country that is projected to grow by 2% in 2023. And it's up to, I think, 107.5 million in mobile revenue for 2024. So small in the grand scheme of things, but even, a location like New Zealand is growing, and, that's exciting for everybody. And, I think when you look at the categories as well, we start to break down the number of App Store downloads, information about play sessions. We see that the average session length for mobile gamers has remained fairly steady from 2022 to 2023 at 32 minutes per session. And then we break into regionally, what does that look like, right? Asia Pacific has the longest session lengths,
Hmm.
increasing from just under 35 minutes to slightly over. And with Latin America, we see there's overall year over year growth in both session length and installs, going up. Overall, yeah, we've seen an increase there, or a decrease rather, from 27 to 26 minutes per session. Sorry, I had that one backwards. But anyway, we go into depth like that in the report. So you get real regional breakdowns that can be really helpful, not just in talking about how the industry is growing, but maybe where you're going to focus some of your efforts. And hopefully that can be helpful to folks out there.
You've heard of Heroic Labs by now, and we keep talking about them because you need every edge to be successful in today's market. Heroic Labs game stack is built like a brick house. You got the Nakama, their backend game server, Hero, their game development framework, Satori, their live op service, and last but not least, Heroic Cloud to provide massive scalability. Heroic Labs is a battle-tested partner, and their tech enables you to be flexible, creative, and scale for success. Focus on your game, avoid tech risks, grow your product with scalable live ops, and save a big chunk of cheese, all with Heroic Labs. And how do you get this data? Because oftentimes we're getting a lot of reports from different companies, whether it's the App Slayer on the UI report side, whether it's Sensor Tower, App Magic. Google does a lot of reports, and there's a little bit of a discrepancy. So I'm trying to understand what's the single source of truth, because there's so many data points coming in. Attention app and game developers, are you ready to unlock the secrets behind the world's top performing apps and games? With Sensor Tower, you get the ultimate competitive edge, whether it's breaking into new markets, fine-tuning your UA strategies, or boosting monetization. Dive into data like never before, track global trends across app stores, analyze market-leading in-app purchase and in-app ad strategies, and benchmark your performance with real-time insight. The best part, Sensor Tower doesn't just deliver data, it helps you turn it into action. With intuitive tools and expert analysis, it's everything you need to make smarter, faster decisions. Thousands of app and game studios, from indie creators to global giants, trust Sensor Tower to help them win. So why not you? Start your free trial today at sensortower.com. That is sensortower.com.
There are so many data points. I mean, it's confusing, right, in the industry, especially when you go out there and see everybody's reports. For us, it's a combination of things, Mishka. It's we have, our own data that we're seeing, and we anonymize, obviously,
Hmm.
just on what's going on. And we'll talk more about this a little later. But off platform, right?
Yeah.
We have great insight into what's happening there. Probably the most insight out of anybody out there. And we'll talk again more about that. But
Yeah.
then we also really talk with our partners, and we get a lot of information from our partners. We sort of survey them officially, and then we unofficially have conversations with people. And then we also use various data sources that with companies that we've partnered up with to, kind of get to this overall picture of where things are.
Yeah, and that's the other challenge, because when we get data from the data platforms or app stores, then they're not seeing the web shop revenue, of course, which is, and some of the games, like again talking anecdotally to some of the top grossing titles, we're saying about almost 50%, some even 50% of their revenue is coming now from web shops, especially with more core games. But they're also not seeing in-app ad revenues, and that again kind of excludes another massive segment of games, as well as a massive portion of revenues. So that's what I mean, is like there's a lot of information coming from different platforms, but none of the platforms is able to fully see what the market looks like. They only have their own vantage point.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. It's really difficult to get an aggregated, comprehensive view. And, that's what we're trying to help provide here. I'm not going to claim that we have, a 100% fidelity on all of that. I think nobody does, but we certainly are in a position where we can bring multiple points of view and data points together and provide, I think, a pretty good assessment of where things are.
Yeah, especially around the off-platform payments. Like that's your unique access to data that others just simply cannot share. And yeah, like it makes sense that the growth is there, because there's tremendous secular tailwinds in the gaming industry that sometimes we forget about when we focus on year over year numbers, and especially when we focus on comparing today's numbers to COVID years or the lockdown years. Like it's nothing will compare ever to that. It was an absolutely unique time, and especially uniquely beneficial to digital products as games. So it's kind of unfair of a comparison. That's why I always, I mean, at least I skip and kind of go back to 2019 or post 2022 comparison rates. And unfortunately, we're kind of already a year removed, so we can actually see what the market truly is. And you mentioned like the other sort of a growth factors. So the secular tailwinds in form of a lot of new players coming into the platform. So I think the year-over-year growth of players worldwide is about 5%. That was a Newzoo data that they showed. That kind of makes sense. You mentioned the privacy, the effect of the privacy changes are kind of be mitigated to some extent with a lot of innovation. I mean, this is recording like a few days after AppLovin's hockey stick numbers. Like
Right.
they clearly know what they're doing, so
They're
kudos on
back.
them.
Yep.
Yeah, they're back. I mean, they're not even back. They're way above what they were even before. And
Yep.
then you mentioned something about session lengths, and I think this was the interesting one. So do you see the increase in session lengths, or is there a comparison number? So how does it go?
Yeah, we definitely are seeing increasing session lengths, and that is something again that we kind of dive into in the report here, and we have some different highlights. I think what that's reflective of, and I'm just scrolling through here a little bit to see if I have some overall numbers, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say you touched on what happened during COVID, right? And we had that huge surge of people coming in to the industry and playing games, and then there was a drop off to be expected. But what I think you're seeing happen, and we're seeing with session lengths, is there are people that have stuck around, and that was kind of a shock to the system in the sense that it introduced a lot of new people to games, and while a lot of them may have dropped out, you still have a cohort that stayed and now are becoming much more mature gamers than they were a few years ago. And I believe that could be one of the reasons that we're seeing a slight increase in session length and playtime. In addition, the games are just getting more and more mature and have much more depth of play to them. We're seeing that increased trend overall as games are, people are really focused on retaining the players, extending the engagement, even into more mid-core and casual kind of games. So I think that's all great. It's good for the industry.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
Yeah, the focus on live ops, and that's what I meant with the vantage point, because I was at a Google event last week, and I had to pull up one of the pictures that Tobias Knock, shout out to Tobias, he was showing in his presentation. He had kind of like two things about the sessions, and no, three things. He said that there was a less time spent with screens, so that was like minus 17% on average. He talked about that average gaming sessions are shorter, minus 16 minutes. And if you were play during weekday afternoons or to pass time, and that was like minus 6%. But all these numbers are a comparison of today against 2021 or 2020. And this is what I mean, is like sometimes we kind of like even platforms want to show certain type of a radical number, and you're like, oh wow, like Google is showing us session, like the engagement is going down. It's like, yes, against peak lockdowns.
It is, and we do have a slide in here. I've pulled up that I'm sort of looking over at on just play sessions, and like I said, we see that the sessions have kind of remained steady from 2022 to 2023 at 32 minutes per session. I just talked about that a little bit, but you do see a slight decline in some markets. North America, Latin America, Eastern, or Europe and Middle East, where there's been a little bit of a decline. But on the other side, we break into different genres, and action games, they kind of take the lead with 45.7 minutes per session, followed closely by RPGs, which is no surprise. And then hyper casual getting the shortest lengths. So I think, when you're talking about overall, like you take session length time as sort of an aggregate overall number, that gives you one picture, which, maybe it's like, yeah, things are declining a little, but I think it's then important to look down by genre, right? And by region to see what's actually happening underneath, because, is this just a story of casual game session length coming down because that COVID cohort has kind of, cycled out a little bit, and the people that have stayed have gone into more mid-core and core games, which would have higher session lengths, but fewer people. So I don't know. It's, I think it warrants a much deeper sort of exploration before having a full, takeaway that session lengths overall are down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I fully understand. And last question about the market growth is like, is the, like, my hypothesis, and maybe I've seen some numbers, maybe it's a hypothesis, maybe I'm remembering something, but it was more that the growth wasn't so significant in matured Asian markets, like we're talking about Japan, China, Korea, as well as key Western markets like the US and Canada and Germany and so forth. But the growth was more driven by emerging markets. We're talking about MENA and Southeast Asia and so forth. Is that correct hypothesis or no?
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. We're seeing real growth in Middle East, North Africa, and just Africa in general. There's been explosive growth there. A lot of that tracks the overall demographics, where you have very young overall, the countries themselves are just very young, the median age. And you have people that have really grown up used to technology and gaming. And now you have these large cohorts of players that are really hungry for content in markets that are also seeing really good economic tailwinds, right? So I think that's accurate.
Yeah, interesting. All right, let's move on to another topic that is totally different and doesn't have anything to do, or maybe has something to do with growth of the market, and that's diversity in gaming. So you covered also this kind of emphasizing the importance of diversity, highlighting the significant role women play as gamers and industry leaders. and how that affects the broader market. So, can you talk about the diversity part of your report?
Absolutely. We're always trying to highlight just how the industry is doing when it comes to being inclusive and expanding and, increasing diversity. I'm a firm believer in the concept that the more variety of voices you have in the room, the better off everybody is, from just a development standpoint, but also the industry. So, we go into this with our reports. We always have a section about it, and we talk about the number of women who are identifying as mobile gamers now. We see that women are definitely a big portion of mobile gamers, with what we see 87% playing at least weekly, and 64% of those making in-app purchases. Which is massive, right? And that's just an increase that we're seeing. Brands are increasingly targeting female gamers. So, people may wonder, like, oh, great, you guys are talking about diversity. We know that's, the industry is becoming more diverse, but what does that really mean for the business? Yeah. And, I think it's important to remember that not only does it help you create better content, but it opens up the door to more opportunities for monetization. As example, here with brands, really increasingly targeting female gamers. So we go into those kinds of things a little bit here. We talk about the growth in streamers and esports with more and more diversity coming in there. And then we kind of cap it off with a really great conversation with, and I apologize, Laura, if I mispronounce your last name, but Laura Teklemariam for our Teslamariam from LinkedIn. She's a senior director of product management there, and really talks about her experience with games and the tech industry. So definitely worth a read there.
Yeah, I'm 100%. I think I told this story before. It's like we've also focused on maybe it's diversity, but what you said in the business sentence of diversity is that I think representation is the right word to use. Is that for almost 10 years, we didn't really have women on this podcast. Of course, we would have guests, but we didn't have women as hosts and so forth, because there was just not concentrated effort. And it was something that my wife said when I tried to get her to listen to this finance podcast that I was really enjoying. And she told me, I'm not going to listen to two dudes talk about money. And it was such a light bulb moment. I'm like, exactly. That's why we don't have women listening to Deconstruct Your Fund. And then there was a very conscious focus on we need to have representation, because it goes with all sorts of entertainment. If you kind of feel like there's a bunch of guys talking about games, that's not going to be as popular as if you have a different types of voices and different types of views by bringing in also female co-hosts.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. And arguably made the product better. So I agree. I agree with you as well on that front. So important topic for any entertainment company is how to reach a broader audience, and diversity and representation is definitely a good medium there. Global market trends and preferences. So this was something that you had here, and we know that every market is very unique. Preferences are very unique. Oftentimes, when even we're analyzing certain games and the content of the games, especially the UGC type of games and their content, we can see that content that is popular in Canada would be content that is not popular at all in Southeast Asia. And they like totally different type of experience and totally different type of games. So this is a interesting topic that you cover here. Can you talk a little bit broader about the trends and preferences?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we go into sort of detail on a regional basis, talking about, we kind of take a view of the growth and the spend and what types of game genres are kind of popular. For instance, in the US, we see that casual and hybrid casual mobile games are driving kind of a resurgence in revenue, with casual games alone making up 60% of the total in-app purchases in the last year. And, we do that kind of overview for each different, region. When you look at Latin America, action adventure and action games, meaning platform fighting, those types of games are the two top game genres among, at least when you look in Brazil in 2024. So I think it's really interesting to note that different, the different, no, it's not a surprise to people, but different genres will be more popular in different regions. And, how does that impact the way you approach the business, not only for monetization, but, what are you localizing? Where are you doing your sort of soft launch tests and all of that? And what's great is I think that represents a healthy ecosystem where you're getting a lot of variety happening around the world, and then that extends into what we're seeing even with the web shops and how people are engaging with them from different places. So a lot of information in the report to that leans into what you're talking about or asking about. So I'd encourage people to check that out.
Yeah, and one element that you had there is like the Middle East is investing heavily in gaming and aiming to establish itself as a global hub by 2030. So you've probably traveled recently to Riyadh, right? Since
I've been there a couple
yeah,
of times this year. Yeah.
tell me, I've never been. What's from not tell me in terms of like a tourist, but like in terms of in terms
Well, I
of
did
the
find
gaming market.
shockingly, there's actually a Mexican restaurant there that is really authentic, which
Yeah,
that's a whole side
run
thing.
by
But
Mexicans.
some
Or
it was some people that had sort of immigrated there, and
oh wow.
it's amazing. It's fantastic. But can talk about that more offline. But
Yeah.
no, look, Riyadh and Saudi Arabia in general. I found it really welcoming, and from a business perspective, they are Saudi Arabia. The kingdom is the only country in the world that has a national mandate. And you've talked with Brian Ward before
Yeah.
multiple times, so your audience has heard this. But they really have a national mandate to grow the games business and the games ecosystem. And this is all part of their Vision 2030 initiative, where they have a goal by the year 2030 to have really diversified their economy. And many countries in the Middle East are looking at this as well, as they're trying to identify what their future looks like after, oil kind of, they don't want to be tied to an oil economy forever, because obviously that's not sustainable. So Saudi Arabia in particular has this amazing Vision 2030 plan that touches multiple sectors, and gaming is one of them. And it includes esports. And we talk about representation. Saudi Arabia actually has the highest percentage of female esports players out of anywhere in the world, which is they're nearly 25% versus I think 5 to 7% average worldwide. So it's amazing the what's going on there. That also means that there's been a lot of investments and funding, and one thing that when you go there and you talk, they're really looking at how can they build up an ecosystem within the country, right? And I think for anybody who's looking to do business in the kingdom, or even any other countries in the region, a lot of times people go in pitching like, "Hey, here's how I'm going to make you a lot of money. Give me an investment, and I'm going to make you a bunch of money," right?
Classic.
And it's
Money
like you got to
grab.
game theory. Exactly. They don't need more money. It's like people. Of course, people like money, but that's not their KPI. That's not their currency. It's job creation, right? So they're really looking at opportunities that help to create jobs within the kingdom, and are supporting things that do that. And that's part of where we've partnered up to go in and help with bringing some events to the region and opening up an academy and an office and things like that. Because we believe it is a fast growing hub, and it's a great place to be. So there's a lot of interesting things happening there. It's a great city to go visit. They have some really cool sort of modern buildings and architecture there. They're building a whole city in and of itself, which is focused on gaming and esports. So a lot of really interesting things going on there. And I was surprised everywhere I went, people spoke fluent English, felt very welcoming. So it was a great experience.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And no, I've heard a lot of interesting things about it. I've again never visited. I came back from Abu Dhabi just last week, so I can imagine different cities, of course, different regions. But there were it was a Google event, and there were founders from Riyadh, who were really keen and like sponges on just trying to get information and super energetic and excited about everything. So it was kind of great talking to them, like how energized they are. Unlike we old cats, like, oh, industry is down, we've seen everything, and they were kind of like full of energy.
Well, that's exactly it. I think, gosh, the average age is in the 30s, right? And, people are educated and tech savvy, and, the majority of the population identifies as gamers. So it's a great place, the highest percentage of internet users and gamers worldwide, actually. It's sort of what is it, the 19th largest online gaming market in the world, which is
Yeah.
which is interesting, right? You wouldn't think that.
Well, like I need to make my way there one day.
Yes.
Um, so let's talk about something that I have been following, which is the impact of Digital Market Act, the good old DMA. And there's a lot of things that have been happening in the DMA. So like the way I see it from the it's a where do I even start unpacking? Like from the lenses of the DMA, so the Digital Market Act, it's App Store distribution is seen as a public good utility that needs to be operated in a way that it promotes competition, which is really different than any legal measure where you check if this is competitive or not, but like, no, you check if it's truly promoting competition or not. So it's like a vice versa. You have to show that you're promoting competition, and you have to show that you're creating a fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory policies that aren't preferencing your own products nor blocking competition. And of course, like we're very familiar with app stores, and this is exactly what they've been doing. And it's been interesting how especially Apple has been reacting to this, because like the idea of DMA and what we got out of it when it was coming out, and like the sort of idea behind the what is it, a law, or however you put it, it's apps are able to link to web stores and offer third-party payments. App stores should allow side loading and third-party app stores, and developers have access to more complete data from these app store platforms. But then again, when we go to the practicalities, like there were these crazy suggestions that came in from Apple as a proposal where they're going to take 70% from alternative app stores. They're going to take 3% processing fee. They're going to put in 50-cent annual core technology fee for every download that goes over 1 million. They're going to put in their rigorous checks and different kind of scare screens. And also on top of all of this, there's going to be just one decision for the entire organization. So you can't even try with one app. Like, no, it's all or nothing. And then if you want to come back, you can come back once. And and then after that, it's a done deal. So it's been interesting to kind of see what's happening. And the things that we've been watching is like, how do these link outs, what is going to be the decision on those? And also this tied to that is the Apple's anti-steering policy. So basically, the way they saw it is if I'm watching a YouTube and I download an app from YouTube, from the ad, they're saying, well, technically, because you downloaded YouTube through the App Store, so this is also taken through the idea that it's also going to be through App Store, and you can't use the link outs there. So, anyways, I'm going to the weeds, but what's going on with DMA right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, the DMA is robust. You mentioned all these sort of anti-steering, all of these high friction kind of moves that Apple has made to dissuade people, right, from benefiting from the DMA. And the EU, the European Commission, they're not dumb. They're keeping an eye on this. They just announced last week that that Apple will soon become the first company to get a fine for violating, right, the DMA's rules around all of this anti-steering stuff. I think I'm waiting to see what that fine is. Apple had previously been fined $2 billion in March for not, embracing the DMA. And now they're facing a fine that is potentially 10% of their annual global revenue.
That's a lot of money.
Which is a lot of money. So that could be $38 billion. And that doubles if they get tagged for a repeat offense. So, that starts to move the needle for even Apple, right? 2 billion, maybe they can shrug off, but 38 that could turn into $76 billion, both in the same year. That's meaningful. So I'm really curious to see how the European Commission enforces that. I don't think anyone expects they're going to drop the full 10% hammer, right? And obviously Apple has time to respond and cure and all of that. But it's good news overall for the industry where, as you mentioned, the intention of the Digital Markets Act is really to force these gatekeepers to open up and allow more fair practices on their platforms. And, it's interesting. We talk about this in the report. We highlight that there's over 10,000 online platforms in the EU digital economy right now,
Mm-hmm.
but the DMA only applies to just a small number, a handful, like half a dozen, because it's really meant to go after the true gatekeepers. And to qualify as a gatekeeper, you have to have over a certain, So, I think there's a lot going on there. We're going to see a big move happening once we see what happens with this EU fine. And that will, I think, really indicate how open and how quickly do these gatekeepers open up, which is just a huge benefit for everybody out there, right? Being able to go direct, steer people out to web shops and give them a bit more sort of expanded experience with your game is hugely beneficial. And we have all kinds of data to show about that.
What's your perception of or expectation? What's going to happen with this? Because it seems like DMA is or European Commission who handles this is quite serious.
They are serious, Mishka. I think, I think there will probably be some sort of fine that comes down. And I think, sort of how big that is and when. There will either be a fine or Apple will make some changes, right? It's going to be an either or. And they are serious. I don't expect it would be a small fine. European regulators have shown no hesitation to fine, U.S. companies heavily. The Russian Google quadrillion fine thing aside, right? But realistic fines, it's a real thing, and companies have to pay attention. And then furthermore, something that people haven't really been talking about yet, because this is new also, is the EU Commission is not sitting back, right? The DMA is out there. It's in effect. They're starting to regulate it and enforce it. But now they also have something called the Digital Fairness Act, right, which brings in a whole new host of regulations around combating dark patterns and addictive designs, meant to simplify subscription cancellations, and then increased compliance complexity in regards to how companies have to be compliant. So, to your question, how serious are they? You just look at what they're doing, right? They've announced fines. They're bringing more regulations. So they're not backing down on this.
That's good for the industry. And do you think that European Commission is kind of leading the way, and there was going to be, just like with GDPR, there's going to be ripple effect in the US and other geographics or countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a comprehensive standpoint, they're leading the way. Obviously, here in the U.S., we did just recently pass a regulation rather, about making it easier to cancel subscriptions, which is one part of this Digital Fairness Act. So I think there's some parity there, but from a comprehensive standpoint, and I think if you look at the spirit of it, of truly opening up these ecosystems and making sure that they're fair and they're level playing ground. The EU Commission is definitely out in the lead, but others are not far behind. Interesting.
Well, all right. Well, let's talk about the next topic, which is I want to kind of talk about web shops, because it has such a good segment or leeway from this, because the web shop is one of the biggest parts. They're going to benefit from all this DMA taking into place. What is your, and this is also the unique vantage points of Xsolla, because you are the biggest web shop providers and you have the most clients and you see the most. So what's happening with the web shops?
Yeah, I love it, what's happening here. So you're right. We do have a great view into these. We have over 400 web shops now that we support, and that number is just accelerating every day. And this is in less than 2 years, right? It just truly has exploded. So that's great and everything. But I think what's really, really interesting, and your audience will probably appreciate this, is that when we talk with mobile gamers, we found out that they're very aware of web shops and alternative platforms to go to. From our research, we see that 81% of players say that they are aware of web shops. They know these things exist. So that's a huge shift in a very short period of time, where it used to be that if you look back at social casino, which kind of led the way with these off-platform offerings, it was a pretty niche market, right? A small number of players. And now companies have really cracked the code on how to message to players, make them aware of these platforms, and start using them. We see that not only do 81% of players say that they know they exist, but we found that 77% of players actually have reported making at least one purchase on a web shop. So this is huge news for the industry.
Wow. And you've seen the rapid growth. And one of the things that when I talk to different developers and like how they've benefited from web shops, most of them have. The ones who haven't are those who are making very casual games. Have you seen the same thing? It's like web shops work extremely well with mid-core audiences, core audiences, casino. But then the more casual we go, the less there's an impact from web shops.
Yeah, I mean that certainly has been the case, and I'm actually going to pull up something right now. But
Yeah.
overall, for sure, I think the early story with web shops was that when you look at sort of mid-core and core games, that's where you're really seeing a lot of the benefit. We have a number of so if you reach out to us, we have a lot of info in the report, but then we have even more information specifically for people interested in web shops, and we have a number of case studies. And just to give you sort of that difference there, I'm going to try to pull a couple of these up, but we see that when you're overall, we're seeing like a 4X strategy game, for instance, it's anonymous. We don't share who or what they are. But we're seeing that this 4X strategy game on their web shop, they have a capture rate of greater than 45%. That means the number of players in the game who are coming to the web shop. The average revenue per paying user, and this is just astounding, is $3,100, $3,100. And the web shop revenue is substantial, right? The uplift on the overall game revenue is on this one, and is probably a third overall of the revenue of the game. Mm-hmm. And then, if you kind of look at sort of more of a casual game, the case study we have here is more of a kids RPG, and there we're seeing lower numbers, obviously, as there should be, but still pretty interesting. About 30% capture rate, little over $100 revenue per paying user. So even on games that tend to be younger and more casual, we're starting to see a growth of web shops. So it's a great business just overall.
Yeah. Okay, good to hear that. And I kind of, the way I assume it is like the stronger community you have, the better the web shops will be functioning, because the community is often outside the game, whether on web or Discord or other type of platforms. And that opens up the ability to connect with the community, and through that, a segue to web shops.
Yeah, absolutely. And we share, some tips for success, right? When you're running a web shop in our report here, the Xsolla Autumn report for 2024. And then we have a much deeper set of best practices, from our web shop team when you start working with us. But you're 100% right. Community is key. Anybody who, thinks of a web shop as just an online version of their in-app store and does nothing else is going to fail. A web shop really takes off when you treat it as an extension of the game, not just a mirror of what's happening in the game, but an extension where you have the same feel and the same branding and the same look, and offers feel like a natural continuation of the game. Continuous communication, right? Always communicating with your players and building up that community, minimizing the friction on the shop to reduce churn. These are all really important. And then the big ones, focusing on value, right? You got to think of what is the value proposition of, what is it that a player is going to get through a web shop that is more value, or not even necessarily more value, but of different value than what they can get in the game. And then, leveraging the power of live ops, really treating this as a true platform in and of itself, where you're, not just running different events throughout the week. And I don't mean gameplay events, although you can link and you should link these to events going on in the game, but even just, turning over what's happening on the store page, tying into maybe your meta a little bit more through the types of offers that you're giving and treating those as events. But then also the analytics, like really analyzing the players. And, what we didn't talk about with things like the DMA and with Webshops, the connector there, is through these regulations with the DMA and through going direct to your player outside of the app stores, you actually get a full set of data, much more data than you get with just the gameplay data that you normally receive. So this allows you to do better acquisition, create better offers, even targeted offers. There's a whole host of things that you benefit from there, and you need to take advantage of if you're going to succeed.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So operating the web shop just like you would operate any kind of a experience. It's not just enough to put in the bundles, couple of images, and here you go. You can buy it there, or you can buy it here, do whatever you want. But just like any kind of a web shop, whatever web shopping experience you use, there's always different things. There's always new stuff coming out, and it's like there's a reason to go back to the web shop, and that applies the same way to games.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have some general case studies that we talk about, like I just shared, but we also have some specific ones. Tilting Point has been a great partner over the years. And, we really talk about they share with us, and we're happy to share with everybody out there, sort of their perspective on what's worked with web shops. They have a number of games, Warhammer Chaos and Conquest, Star Trek Timelines, that have really benefited from web shops. And they go into detail in our report on their sort of what has helped them succeed and some of the metrics. So I think that'll be of interest to folks.
Interesting. All right, some more web shop information. Step into the future of game monetization with Xsolla. Xsolla empowers developers and publishers to market, sell, connect, and optimize their games globally. From payment solution to a full suite of tools designed to grow your game's revenue while fostering a loyal player base. Xsolla is your game's gateway to worldwide success. With Xsolla, the world is your playground. Visit xsolla.com today and find all the solutions that will help you to power your games into success everywhere. Just connect with Xsolla naturally. Last one, cross-media integration. So this was interesting because this is something that I've not heard about and not really, I don't know what Amazon's secret level is, which is a game-inspired anthology series. So can you talk more about like what this cross-media integration trend is about?
Yeah, I think, look, you all talk about this a lot on sort of on the podcast with whatever you want to call it, transmedia.
This is transmedia stuff?
Exactly. But I think the general idea here is just, we're seeing, and especially as we're seeing much more of a connection of interests, right, for players around their games, whether it's new types of media content, new types of community or fandom or whatever it may be. But we're really seeing, a lot of benefit from companies that are leaning into this cross media and really bringing it all together. And it's a little disjointed, but when I say bring it all together, now that companies are able to actually operate their own platforms, and we've seen this on PC for a long time, right? But on mobile now that you can have your own web shop, the next generation is really thinking of it beyond just a web shop, but as kind of your own platform where you can link everything together that your players may like. And, whether that's directing them to, fan fiction or shorts, or having, your own messaging boards up there, your own community, everything linked around the game. I think this is really, really driving some higher engagement for players, and something people should start. It's still early. I think the best practices are still up in the air. The timing of things needs to be worked out, but it's an area worth looking into, and we're starting to track that a little bit here.
What's the connection? Why transmedia is so important for you to track? Is it because transmedia is seen as an avenue to overall growth of the gaming market? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly. It comes back to a word I had mentioned a few moments ago about web shops, but I think it's a word you could apply more broadly, which is value, right? What value are you, bringing for your players? And, I love to talk about how with games, there's two ways to think about games. There's the old way where people think of games as just this, silly pastime. It's something that, just a few people do, and it's kind of it's a kid's thing, right? And that's completely the wrong way to look at it. The way that I look at it now, and what ties into what you're asking, is when you look at games as a hobby, right? And you truly think about this as somebody's number one hobby. This is what they prefer to do in their spare time. And when you think of it through that lens, and you look at other hobbies, right? Whether it's things like golf or sports or mountain biking or theater or whatever, take your pick, right? There's a whole host of things that people engage with as their primary hobby. And when you think of it that way, those hobbies tie everything together, right? If you're a golfer, of course you're going out and playing golf. You're looking at clubs, you're reading things online about them, you're watching shows, maybe you're watching Happy Gilmore for the 100th time, whatever it may be. But, you're engaging with all these different pieces of content because they're adding value to your hobby experience. And I think that is what is interesting from a game perspective, that this industry really is matured, and people are treating it as their primary hobby. And that creates the opportunity for linking a lot of different, content together, which just increases the overall value proposition for the consumer, but also gives a lot of opportunities to find new ways to increase engagement and grow your game.
Interesting. Well, fascinating. It's a really good report. Did we leave something uncovered?
Oh my goodness. I think we went pretty deep, not as deep as the report goes. It's almost 50 pages. And then we have a lot of additional materials to back that up for people that want to go even deeper. So this has been great. I really appreciate, your time with this, Mishka.
Well, I appreciate you. And I want to say to everybody that they should follow you on LinkedIn, because you do a lot of surveys. You share a lot of interesting information. Your LinkedIn page is really booming. Like, just recently you talked about military veterans and gaming. So I went in and kind of you have a lot of interesting stuff. So I highly suggest that people follow you on LinkedIn. So again, link in the description below.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Mishka. That means a lot. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. And Chris, thank you again for coming on the podcast and kind of updating us on how the industry is doing for a very unique vantage point of the biggest, largest, arguably the best web shop in the business.
Thank you. Happy to be here and happy to come back anytime.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. And thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Misha. Bye.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the deconstructor of fun content creators. Thanks for listening.